Welcome to our continuing series of virtual voices. Thank you for your letters. We appreciate receiving them. Our speaker today is Diane Finnerty, who is the Senior Vice President at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management Group. Mariam Mazarm, a member of our board of directors, will introduce her friend, Ms. Finnerty. Over to you, Mariam.
Thank you, Christine. I'm very honored to introduce my friend Diane Finnerty. For the last 12 plus years, Diane has led the FCG Wealth Management Group at Morgan Stanley, overseeing strategic investments across all forms of asset classes. Diane brings more than 3.5 decades of wealth management experience. She has a committed concentration on result-driven, bespoke private wealth management with an emphasis on women who are specifically in transition. At Morgan Stanley, Diane demonstrates success by providing visionary leadership in highly competitive financial markets. She's a member of the elite and privileged Morgan Stanley Rainmakers program, which focuses on the ultra-high net worth clientele. Prior to Morgan Stanley, Diane was the founder and CEO of 2 separate investment management firms, Ventur Asset Management and Ventur Wealth Management. She successfully managed both companies with AUM of over $3 billion. Each had distinctly different strategies for high net worth individuals, families, and charitable foundations, as well as small companies and nonprofit organizations. Diane participated in the Women on Wall Street event at the White House and is a member of numerous organizations, including 100 Women in Finance. She elevates the network and high water women, as well as a presenter and contributor at numerous conferences and seminars. She has been quoted in many leading articles, including the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, the New York Times, the Boston Globe, Street.com, and other leading publications. Most recently, Diane was included in Forbes' ranking of the nation's top women wealth advisors list for 2020. She also has a BA in psychology and a master's from Columbia University, which makes her extremely qualified to deal with women clientele. Beyond her career, Diane is a member of Plum Alley Investments, a company dedicated to advancing the human experience by investing in women entrepreneurs and gender balanced teams. She's also a board member of the Women of Achievement. Their mission is to empower, connect, and engage women in a community that fosters professional growth and leadership while advancing the field. Additionally, Diane is a founding member of Access Circles. It's a 501c3 by invitation-only global leadership network for women, providing connectivity, knowledge, and access to thought leaders, resources, and experiences that transform their lives. Diane, you have the floor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Dr. Durbach, for having me today. I'm excited. As you probably know, our to be about giving with purpose. And I want to start by just sharing with you an antidote, because I think it's of help. I have a client who brought a company public in 1992, and it created really a significant and abundant amount of wealth for him. He was only age 50, and not only did this wealth, not only was it for himself, but it was also for his extended family. He did grow up with parents who were giving. They participated in a local Y and actually had really made that their focus and their mission. However, when it came for him to decide what truly mattered, it was very difficult to determine where to give, how to give, and why to give. And together, we truly explored what are the benefits, what makes him feel passionate, what ultimately is how he would like to be remembered. He selected 3 specific charities: his alma mater, NYU Law School, Columbia Presbyterian, New York Hospital, where he sits both on both the NYU board as well as on the Columbia Presbyterian Hospital board. where of course he gives fiscally, but also he has made a real commitment to his time. He sits on the board of both of those institutions. And lastly, he continues to get to that why, which had been named after his father. And he purchased a camp and created a non-for-profit children's camp that was named in honor of his mother. Through giving, I can say he has found joy, he has found a purpose, and he has also found great solace. As you probably all know, ultimately, through giving, through being charitable, it creates a really special feeling for the giver and the person that is getting. And we know that one of the highest ambitions in life, I believe, is to give and to be charitable. It is really very much woven into the fabric of our lives. It is woven into the fabric of how organizations, societies around the world want to be remembered. And it's important to note that while many individuals and families have a deep commitment to philanthropy, charitable giving is not limited to those with significant wealth. So with that, I would like to start on a presentation that I've created for today's virtual voices. And we're going to start and go to the first page, which is really the agenda, what we're going to be covering in this sort of 40-minute discussion. We're leaving a series of time available for questions. So if I could ask, please, for you to turn to the next page, and the page after that, please. And you're going to see our agenda, and it's, whoops, one back if you wouldn't mind. Thank you, Fred. And you're going to see we're going to be covering 5 separate areas of giving: benefits of charitable giving, the trends, the current trends, finding your philanthropic passion, what truly matters, how to give in a strategic and thoughtful manner, and lastly, family, legacy, and philanthropy. And so I hope in my small anecdotal story, I tried to cover all of these 5 items, but we're going to go into a deeper analysis and go over and break this down to the next page, which is page 3, and we're going to really discuss the benefits of giving. I think a lot of us, when we think about giving, and it was probably in the late 60s and early 70s, a real important factor to giving was undoubtedly to receive a tax deduction. However, we've found out that is really not the most important purpose and reason to give. We can see that there are 4 things that really are purposeful and why we wish to give. And the first one that has the heart is letting us know we want to make a difference. When you make a donation or offer your time, you have influenced the lives of many people. Additionally, you have also, hopefully, strengthened your familial ties. You bond family members across many generations, and you also very much let the family know what the tenets of what is important as a unit and as an extended family. Additionally, there is the growth of your professional development. You can grow your network and you can join forces with kind of like-minded people that share the same reasons, the same purpose of giving. And then lastly, your own personal development. And there is really nothing else that they have found through multiple studies that makes people feel happier and healthier than giving. So these are sort of the 4 benefits of why we should give. I'd like, if we could, please go to the next page. And we're going to talk about trends, new trends that are happening in philanthropy. And if we go to the next page, we'll see, and that would be page 5, if you would mind, Fred. You can see that there has been, most recent year that I've got numbers and access to, is that in excess of $449 billion were made in total contributions in 2019. What do we see on this page? We really see sort of two very large circles. Let's stay on the left-hand side and talk a little bit about what the contributions have been by source. 69% of the giving has come from individuals. So that is meaning often large, but often small commitments and donations. Next, we see foundations. That's about 17%, and then bequests of just 9%, and corporations, unfortunately, only giving 5%. If we look to the right, we start to see where do these people and foundations and bequests and corporations give to. And interestingly, the largest percentage is going to religious factors, and that really very much runs the gamut. The next you'll see is about 14% going to education. Human services is about 12%. Gifts to other foundations is also about 12%. Health, and that's including hospital giving, etc., is 9%. Public society benefit is 8%. Art, culture, and humanities, unfortunately, is only 5%. And then international affairs, 7%. Environmental and animals, only 3%. And we're truly hoping that that's going to start to increase. And then lastly, to individuals. So we're talking about just a little under $450 billion of total contributions given in 2019. We'll probably have an update of 2020 by the end of this first quarter. So, and it will be interesting to see how, in light of COVID, what has been the impact of not only the total contribution number, but really the recipient category as well. If I could please ask you to go to the next page of my presentation, and we're going to talk about some of the new trends that we're seeing. We are undoubtedly seeing a very significant increase from 2014 through 2018 in DAFs, and donor-advised funds. But before I go on, I want to tell you what is a donor-advised fund. It is among the easiest and most tax-advantaged way to give to charities by sponsoring organizations such as an institution like a Morgan Stanley, like a JP Morgan or Fidelity, and it is administered by that sponsoring organization, that 501, which is of course a 501c3 public charity. DAFs are structured organizations that form a very specific goal of managing those donations on behalf of individuals, families, and companies. Donors have the opportunity to retain the advisory privileges over how the money should be granted to whatever charity they select. And the contributions to a DAF are invested in line with whatever the donor's preferences are, and to have the potential to grow tax-free while the donor recommends and decides which charities he or she would like to support. So I'm going to just jump back, and we're going to speak about this in greater detail later in our discussion. But as I made reference, there has been really, if we look at 2014, so pretty much 5 plus years ago, we can see there was $70 billion that were utilized to give through a donor-advised fund, while by 2018, we're seeing in excess of $121 billion. And my guess is, and what we've really found at Morgan Stanley, personally, a number of my high net worth, ultra high net worth clients have opened apps because it's very easy to create them and it makes it very, very simple to give. I'm later going to do a comparison about donor advised funds and a probably more traditional approach that has been utilized for many, many years, and that's a private foundation. But I'm going to continue to talk about more of the new trends that we're experiencing in giving. So if I can ask you please to go to the next page, to page 7. And this is really about giving circles. Before we start looking at all these multiple circles, I'd like to just make sure that you know what a giving circle is. It's a type of a hands-on charity where donors either contribute money or their time to a shared collective fund. Additionally, the donors can jointly decide whom to bequeath. And we have 2 examples that come up, education as well as healthcare. I wanted to share a few of the giving circles that I have been asked and clients of mine have been involved in. In 2002, it was really my first introduction to giving circles, and it was the Queer Youth Fund, which, as I said, was established in 2002. It's based in Los Angeles, and it has invested more than $3 million in grants with a specificity to small youth-led organizations, both in the US and in Canada. Also, another one in 2004 that I was involved in was the African American Giving Circle. It's a part of the Washington Area Women's Foundation, and they have been able to award just a little over 120 million in grants to community-based organizations. There's another one that is in Grenville, South Carolina, and that's called the Dining for Women Giving Circle. And their chapters really, even though they're headquartered in South Carolina, they have a very big giving circle movement really throughout the U.S. And what they're very much trying to do is assist in giving and supporting women and girls facing extreme challenges in developing countries. So it's a real international charity, nothing to do with the U.S. focus. As I made reference, I want to just talk a little bit about, maybe we'll use the example of education, that very large, darker blue circle we're seeing, and we see a number of silos coming off to that. And I have on my pretty much the next page, on page 8, a little bit about how these charitable giving stages evolve. And we can see that education or that healthcare example have a real specificity to the giving circle. And with these 3 different stages, it allows you to kind of identify, one, with an early stage, how and what are the interests that you have. Is it to give to your boarding school that you had attended, or is it a specific program that your school has gotten involved in and you'd like to give in that way? But we also suggest when you're starting out that you draft what I say a charitable mission statement. And I will go over how and give you an example of a mission statement. But let's take a look at the middle and middle circle and how you become a little more involved. You start by kind of employing a DAF or a private foundation or even a trust. And vehicle has been established. And then you begin to really create some grant-making policies, some procedures that you want to really personally follow, and that can be shared with your giving circle. In addition, in that middle phase, you want to talk and know about the type of reporting you should do. And I make note here that you should have impact reporting. And what does it mean? What is an impact report? Impact reporting basically means you're communicating the difference that you made to the people that you're trying to help or to the issue you were trying to improve. Social impact reporting is a communication strategy, and it's used really to convey change created by the organization. It's there to assist you in how those changes also came about. An impact report isn't just really a description of your activities or even the shareholders of this foundation or stakeholder activities, but it also should include an analysis about how much difference has happened. And then lastly, one of the last stage is the advanced stage, and that's where you begin to really talk about a charitable legacy, a succession plan. You want to start to take that succession plan, which again is just a process for identifying and developing new leaders, which can replace the old leaders when they leave or they retire or they pass on. Succession planning really increases the availability of getting experienced people, capable people that are prepared to assume these roles as they become available. And the participation in family members really is just such an important factor of the gestalt, the whole picture of giving. I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, please, to go to the following page. It's page 9, and we're going to talk about, again, some additional trends in philanthropy, very much around and about next gen. And you can see that there are 72.1 million U.S. millennial currently. So that's the population. And how do we define a millennial? Anyone who was born between the ages of 1981 and 1996. We also see on this slide that there is $68 trillion that is going to be transferred from the baby boomers to Gen X and ultimately to millennials over the next 25 years. So there is going to be a really considerable cash infusion that is going to be passed on to both the Gen X and the millennials. We also can see that just going to 2018, 51% of millennials donated to a nonprofit. And how did they do that? They often gave to 3 to 5 different charities. They gave approximately $590 in total. And most importantly, how did they participate? How did they give? Via social media. They participated in Giving Tuesday. Anything that was online, they felt far more comfortable doing than the possibility of or even the thought of writing a check or zealing. They want to know and be more involved. So I think those are really very key points that we want to think about, and as well as start to create relationships with millennials and letting them know if you're involved in a non-for-profit, a 501c3, really letting them know through a social media campaign how, what, and the importance of what your foundation is currently doing. If you can go to the next page, we're going to talk about our third topic. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we can stay on the trends. I think this is just sort of a repetition of some of the next gen donor trends, where again, we're seeing that the trends are very much leveraging your network. talking about making sure that you have a online portal that is specific to what and the approach that you are trying to accomplish through your 501c3. You want also to have investment-based philanthropy. Now, when we talk about an incentive-based, where are and how are we going to measure that? And then lastly, program-related investments that are very much impact investing. And impact investing, just for edification, it refers to the types of investments that you're making. It's made into companies, into organizations and funds that have the intention to generate a measurable social or environmental impact alongside a financial return. Impact investments really provide the capital to address these social and or environmental issues. So I think this is important, in terms of what we're seeing on these trends, and more importantly, younger people and how they're doing so. Now we're going to go to our next slide, and it's the third topic from our agenda, and it's as titled, Finding Your Philanthropic Passion. I'd like to try to review these themes that are noted below by really trying to illuminate your attitudes regarding creating sort of this path to how and to why and to whom you want to dedicate your giving to. I found that my partners and I at MS are spending a great deal of time with our clients exploring the heart of giving. And so we kind of begin to the left, and we can go up and down, but basically we look at education and or professional development. These are often a key passion because there has been a school history. You've gotten involved often in a career through your college, and or it's part of your career's trajectory. If we go to seminal life events, we see as we get older, we marry, we start a family. We also begin to have the loss of a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, or a dear friend. It can have a very significant effect as well as impact on how and why you want to give. Additionally, if you have moved, if you've gone to a new state or migrated to a new country, a new continent, being able to very much see something quite differently and wanting to be a part of that. The spiritual development side, which often comes with the milestones of being involved in a religion. If it's through Judaism, beginning quite early and being bar or bat mitzvahed. Through Catholicism, it's making a communion. We're going to scoot down to personal development, and again, what about personal development? Our experiences with travel are undoubtedly important. I'm going to stop and just share a brief story about my daughter, Margot. When she, I guess about 15, 18 years ago, maybe a tad more, we went to Kenya. We went on a photographic safari. And part of that photographic safari allowed us to visit a fishing town, a small fishing town. And when we went, she was really, as was I, flabbergasted by the children, not only not having pens and paper and pencils, forget about having any kind of a opportunity to go online and to have a computer. Or when she came back home to New York, she decided that through her school that she was going to start a giving fund that was specific to these young children in Kenya and part of this fishing village. And now she is age 30, and she continues to be a part of this. And it really all evolved through a personal experience. But undoubtedly, volunteering and going and being a participant in any area in which you have an interest is of great importance. And lastly, in terms of personal development, is really your social involvement, being around like-minded people who also have a like-minded interest. And then I just think that we can't forget our family. And when we look at our family, the customs and the mores of your family undoubtedly are integrated into your own values. I note a few other highlights. Your parents' work. Often those are messages and lessons that we acquire from watching our parents. Were they philanthropic, or are they in a field where they are working as physicians or multiple other areas? Your own relationships with your brothers and sisters, and undoubtedly how and the way in which you grew up. I want to share another little anecdote. A relatively new client I introduced to an organization. It's called The Maiden Factor. And I invited him actually to a movie that's called The Maiden Factor. And it's about this woman who at the age of 26, Tracy Edwards, was the first to captain an all-female crew to ever sail around the world. He watched this movie and later called me a day or two later and said that he had just recently lost an aunt who was a truly enthusiastic sailor, and he wanted to make a contribution, but he had one hope, that they could paint her name on the ship so others would be able to see who she was and hopefully to ask about her. And from that, the Maiden Factor has now utilized having, again, depending upon the size of the gift, is having all of the names of their donors be, their names be on the ship. So it was quite exciting to see. But lastly, when we go up to that sort of final point, what are we trying to do? We're really trying to create a legacy, family, our career, and ultimately of giving. And these multiple layers, our seminal events, our background, familial background, our own personal development, our educational experiences, and our undoubtedly spiritual development allow us to get there. I'm going to ask, please, to go to the next page, which is page 13, and it is the fourth topic we're going to be talking about. It is about, and the page after that, please, page 13, I'm sorry. And it's really about how to give strategically. Here we see, I made reference earlier in our discussion about a mission statement. And what is a mission statement? It's a short declaration of why an organization exists, what its overall goals are. It identifies those goals of its operations and the kind of services that it's providing, its primary patrons or its market. And it also includes its geographical region of the operation. If you have a moment, I'm going to ask you just to take a look at the example of a quote-unquote well-crafted mission statement. I'll give you a moment or two because I think it's important. Hopefully that's been enough time. If we look to the left, I have sort of four key things that are going to help us. They're going to address what that mission statement will really be about. It's the center, of your charitable giving causes. You want to really circumvent mission draft. And what is mission draft? It's really, as the term pretty much indicates, it's basically what happens when an organization starts to move away, drift away from the goals that it had initially outlined in its mission statement. We want to make sure that it clarifies or elucidates the family's multi-generational philanthropic or benevolent objectives. What's the purpose and why the family has done so with a clarity. And lastly, to assist in designing a really well-defined and enduring bequest. So those are the four kind of aspects that you want in your mission statement. If I can ask you to please go on to the next page, which is 14. And this is more about designing the portfolio. So we have our statement, and now we want our portfolio. What's the objective here? It's really to construct a portfolio, to choose the types of investments you want. Do you want to have stocks, bonds, alternatives? And that will ultimately assist you in achieving what your objective is. Often there are three types of areas that you're going to be looking at in your giving portfolio. And you can see here that about 60% of your money is going to be given to that core part. So that is where, again, if we go back to using a little bit of that first education sample I gave, you would be, these are just examples, but it would be giving to K through 12 education, inner city schools, after school programs, preparedness for college. And that is really where, as I said, 60% of your giving will happen. The next part, 25%, is really about discretion or discretionary. And that happens more when you get a call or get a letter or an email stating, or from your alma mater, or from your graduate program, that they'd like you to be a participant. They want you to make a donation. It's also from local art museums, and it's things like getting involved in a friend's marathon or any other area where there is a small but discretionary gift. And then last but not least is sort of what I call the emergency. And these are really causes that you have not planned for. You weren't seeing them, you didn't really want to get involved, and yet you feel a real need to do so. And that's considered, as I put here, disaster relief. And we have seen, particularly over the last year, due to the impact of COVID, that there have been multiple emergency asks. I know through the firm we have been very focused on food banks and giving, but we have seen that with a lot of need on the emergency side because of what we've all experienced through COVID. And then, of course, events to fundraise for. If I can ask to please go to page 15. This is really about how do you give? I call it really the 3 T's. It's time, it's your talents, and ultimately the treasure or your dollars. And you can see when we discuss time, you can do this in multiple ways. You can be a mentor, you can assist in networking, you can be a fundraiser, or you can volunteer literally your time. Your talent, and people often don't think about that T. They forget that you can work as an advisor for the foundation. You can strategize. If you have marketing background or consultative background, the foundation often will want and need you as much as they need your time and as much as they need your money. Lastly, it's really the treasure, and those are undoubtedly the money that you're able to donate. We can see there are multiple ways: those direct donations, the donor-advised funds, which we spoke about, private foundations, and also through a giving circle. I'd like to go to the next page, which is talking about a checklist and how do you really discuss and how do you address your due diligence. We know that if we're going to be committed to giving money, we want to make sure that there is an alignment with the strategy that we're giving to. Do their objectives align with what you want and how you want to give? Let's talk about success. How does that organization measure success? How does it define success? And what are the absolute outcomes in measuring that? If we look at the organization and look at its operating costs, what are they vis-a-vis a percentage of their revenue, as well as a percentage of the grants? Do they have a very diversified income stream, or is it a single or highly concentrated approach? And we saw that a number of foundations were very significantly impacted last year because they often had one stream of money or a single stream of money. And that was they would do an annual black tie event. And there was no way that was going to happen last year. So there was a very significant decrease in organizations having that relied upon a single stream to reach their goals last year. And I think as important is, does the executive director, the ET, does she have a well-defined understanding? Does she know the importance and the goals of the foundation? Does she have a good reputation? Is she supported by a great board, a board that's committed? They're sound. And lastly, is there a supportive staff that is there and aligned with her and ultimately aligned with the board? So these are sort of the 6, I think, due diligence factors that we all need to address as we make and further commit our giving approach and our giving strategy. I'd like to go to page 17, where I made reference a little bit earlier about donor-advised funds. And again, just really quickly as a reminder, a donor-advised fund is structured as a 501c3. It's formed with the goal of managing charitable donations and it's really one of the easiest and most tax-advantaged ways to give across really a range of wealth. And as you can see, the donor has the charitable deduction. It's seen as a gift. It's part of that donor-advised fund, which of course is a public charity, and then it can make grants to multiple charities. The other thought I think I'd like to mention is that a donor-advised fund can be titled in your own name. You can come up with any name that you would like, and it's very, very easy. And I'm going to go through kind of a comparison, between donor-advised funds and which you're going to see on the next page, the private foundations. But I'd like to first give you a little bit of background on private foundations. So I'm going to ask you to please go to page 8.
Diane, I don't want to interrupt you. However, we have, it's already 12:45 and we will not have any time for questions.
Great. Okay, so why don't I do this? Why don't I stop here? Why don't I just talk about the 5th, the final part, just very briefly, maybe a minute or two. That's going to start on page 21.
That will be fine.
And then I will do that within minutes, less than 2 minutes. I'll try. So
we will just have to invite you again to finish.
It would be my honor. It would really be my honor. So if I may ask, Fred, for you to go to page 21, and it's about family, about legacy, and about philanthropy? Great. And this is the fifth of our agenda topics, but I want to go to it. This is so important because I think when we look at this, what really makes a difference? What makes a difference is to give. And how can you augment the power of your philanthropic dollars is to contemplate and to think about some of these strategies, to share your story, why and how, and what is the purpose and reason for getting involved, to ultimately revisit your goals, to reevaluate your aspirations and making sure that your objectives are being addressed, to stay involved and to make certain that you meet and assess and quantify your accomplishments. With that, I got a lot of other information to share, but time is limited, and I hope you found this information really to be of value. I am prepared for any questions, any thoughts. I want to thank both Miriam, my dear friend Azam, and Dr. Durbach so much for inviting me today to speak. And I want to just share, you can get my email through Dr. Durbach or through Miriam, and I would be honored to help and support you in any questions in any way I can and be of further support.
What qualities, at least three, must be in a person to develop and help others? Could you please explain a little bit more?
Great question. Thank you so much. So I think that there are two real qualities. The first is empathy, the ability to really connect with someone, not sympathize with them, but to empathize with them, or the purpose. I'm using them in a plural, and I'm talking really about organizations and foundations, but the person that is interested in wanting to give has to be empathetic, has to have an understanding that, wow, when I think about what happened last year, as an example, with the amount of people that needed to wait on lines, food lines, because they've lost their jobs, I want to do something. I understand. I'm fortunate enough not to have to do so, but how can I give? So I hope that answers that part of the question. And the second part, if I may ask you again, Dr. Durbach?
There is another question regarding at what time should the person begin thinking about developing or starting a foundation, and what ages would be the best time? Are you supposed to wait when you are old, or can you do it when you are young?
Well, as we saw with a lot of the new trends for next gen, more specifically millennials, they are starting at sometimes as early as the age of 18. The average numbers we're getting is probably more around 32 to 35. If your family has been involved and has established some sort of a foundation, probably a private foundation initially, more and more people now, as I mentioned, are doing the donor-advised funds, that if you have been introduced to it, and hopefully you've been introduced to it at a very early age, maybe age 5, letting your children, your grandchildren, or your great-grandchildren know the importance of giving. It is a few of the slides that I wasn't able to go over, but if anyone is interested in having me share that presentation, more than glad to do so. But I think the real numbers are probably around the late teens, early 20s, and then starting your own sort of donor-advised foundation would probably be in one's early 30s. Makes sense. I always say the sooner the better, because it's allowing you to think about, to also learn about what really touches your heart, your head, and your soul simultaneously.
Another one is to what extent and at what time do you think that children should be taught about how to give and what is their responsibility to develop a giving program or a giving attitude?
Excellent question. Yeah, I say that we start between the ages of 3 and 5. Now, people say, what do you mean 3 and 5? They're little. How do you start? Well, one of the ways we know is through UNICEF, by collecting coins and by informing them why they are doing that, what that little orange and black box means. And as importantly, when they are at school, often they are involved in, and this starts really at the age of 3, they are asked to bring in books for certain communities, right, not far from where they live, that don't have that kind of access. So I think the earlier the better. And I do go through little examples of how one can give at the ages of 3 to 5, a little older than that, pre-adolescence, adolescence, and then ultimately right up to college and adulthood.
I have a question, but before I ask you, Miriam has a question. Miriam?
Okay, Miriam, you're on
Unmute,
mute,
yeah. Sorry, actually, Dan, I want to find out from yourself, what is your favorite story of a giving that you can remember of either a client or experience that changed your life dramatically, like changed the course of life?
So really, my first anecdote, Miriam, when I started the discussion today, was really this client who brought his company public and went from having some wealth to becoming a billionaire, and walking him through. This was started, and he's been a client of mine since 1986. Remains one, but in 1992, when he brought his company public, going through that experience of really identifying what was important to him, to his wife, his parents were still alive, integrating what mattered to them, and then ultimately stepping back and saying, I have to really decide. I have to decide with my wife what truly touches me. And that was a wonderful, wonderful, it was probably the most dynamic experience that I had. And it was a number of years ago. So, and it stayed and it resonates. And I see the connectivity that remains to those boards. So yes, I think that would be it.
Yeah, in the sense that you have a degree in psychology, you also feel that when somebody has made, sufficient money to outlast them, that you sort of guide them into think about giving. I mean, is there a trend there for you to do that? Psychology is very.
Yes, as a wealth advisor, I really believe I have a responsibility to talk about, in addition, of course, how I'm managing my team and my firm are managing their wealth. But I feel I also have a fiduciary responsibility to teaching them about giving, to finding out, and to often it's even the first time they have even given it a thought. They've only been focused on making money. I mean, it very much depends. But people who bring their company public and I start to work with them, they've not thought about anything but that company. And now it's really very much talking about this is more wealth, than most people need. And how do we think about contributing some of that wealth to things that truly matter to you?
Following up on what you are saying about teaching about giving, we live in a narcissistic society, and I work with a lot of patients, and a lot of my patients are heads of companies. How do you teach them, or how do you help them from your perspective to focus, instead of buying stuff, and buying the next airplane, the next jet, the next mansion. How do you teach them, instead of focusing on being bureaucrats, taking the responsibility of sharing the wealth with people that basically can benefit from it?
Yes. Often it's from one of the very first things I also said today, and that is to talk about the tax advantage. To say you're going to do well and do good simultaneously. So if you give, you are going to receive the tax deductions of your giving. But that's not enough. That's not enough. There's got to be something. I don't know if any of you have read, there are so many books, but I think of Steve Schwartzman's book where he talks about very early on when he created real wealth, he just said, I'm so lucky. I want to. There's that luck factor. I'm so fortunate. I can buy anything I want, but I also need very much to know that I have to give some. And I think not all, I know a lot of very, very wealthy people, heads of all sorts of companies and institutions, are really singularly focused. But I do look at someone like my CEO, James Gorman, who not only donates and requests donations from all of us fiscally, but he donates time and sits on a number of boards. So also, if there's one of those very, very wealthy CEOs that really loves music, getting him involved, or really has spent a great deal of time in India and wants to make some changes there. There are segues. And often you have to do it for them. You have to let them know. You've tripled the growth of your company by expanding to India. Let's talk about how you want to give back, because it's made you a tremendous amount of money. So you've got to suggest and introduce and share that, remind them.
Thank you. That is an excellent example to end on. And I would like to thank you for a wonderfully inspirational and educational presentation. And I also would like to thank Marion for taking my place at the beginning, and I apologize again. And we hope that we'll be able to invite you once again to continue on where you ended from page 18 on. So thank you.
Great. And there's so many other topics that, yes, if you're interested, that I would love to share. Yes, but
Marion,
thank you
do you
all.
want to say something?
Well, Diane, that was as usual. You're always the one who gives credit and floor to so many of your friends and some of your clients. And I've been to so many of your great events, but this was so special to hear you personally speak about your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom on so many areas that I think people tend to forget. So thank you so much for doing this. And I know how busy you are. And well, thank you again. And I hope we can get you to come back and speak about more subjects that we would love to learn about. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Yeah, just so you know, I'm getting on a call. Thank you. And I'm just about to get on a call with a 501c3 in Costa Rica. So I'm going to say goodbye and thank you again all. And if questions, concerns, thoughts, copies of the presentation, just please let me know, and I'll avail myself to getting out as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye all. Thank you.